Lighting is one of the most important aspects of 3D. If you want to have good scenes, good renders, good animations, then you definitely want to have good lighting. Lighting can either make or break your scene, and it's very, very important to learn it and master it. Now, don't feel pressured because of that. A lot of newcomers are intimidated by lighting, but if you master the basic principles, you're going to be fine. So in this video, I want to show you all different lights that Blender offers and how we can apply those lights to different objects. To demonstrate this, I want to use this cube as an example, but later on in the course, we're going to go more advanced and we're going to learn the character lighting. So without any delays, let's begin. First of all, I want to show you what kind of lights we have. So first, if I want to create a light, I don't want it to spawn right inside of this cube, and I have a 3D cursor right here. So I'm going to move my 3D cursor right over here. So I'm going to do Shift right click and move my cursor here so that you can see what kind of lights we're talking about. Now, if you remember, adding objects and other things in Blender is done by either here, clicking on Add, or by clicking Shift A. So I'm going to click on Shift A and then scroll down and go over here where it says Light. Now, you're going to see we have 4 different lights. We have a point light, we have a sunlight, a spotlight, and the area light. We also have an HDR light here. I'm going to explain what that is, but HDR lighting is not provided here, but there is a way we can create it pretty easily. First, I'm going to explain those 4 lights. So the first one you're going to see is the point light. And now I'm going to create a point light over here. And this is the same light which we saw when we opened Blender. So when you open Blender, you have a cube, you have a camera, and you have a point light. Okay, I'm going to go inside the rendered view, and I'm going to show you what this does. The reason why you don't see any effect, the reason why it looks like so small and has no effect, it's because we're in the material view right now and we don't have any lights. Now, there is actually a way to enable lights inside the material view. So if I go up here, click on this arrow, enable scene lights, and then click on Scene World, and now you notice the appearance of the scene changes. Now, material view in Cycles with these things enabled is basically the same thing as rendered view inside Eevee. So now if I switch to Eevee, so if I click on Cycles and switch to Eevee, I can go up here, go to the rendered view, and you can see it's basically the same thing. So that's why Eevee is very fast. So basically, Cycles material view uses Eevee to preview its things. But we're going to go inside the rendered view so that you can see what each light does. So now, if I take this point light, right, it's kind of hard to see because it's right in front of the 3D cursor. But if I move it with G and move it closer to the cube, you can see the effect it's having. Basically, the point light, I'm going to do the annotation to explain what this does. Point light basically casts a light in all directions in a circular motion. For example, if you create a point light, you get lighting like this. So we get a circle and it basically throws the light in all directions, which sometimes is what we're looking for, right? There are some cases where we want the point lights and there are some cases where we don't want point lights. So if you're working on scenes which have, like, for example, torches or lamps or any other artificial lights, then using point lights is very good. And it also creates some cool, nice looking shadows and reflections. So right now you might notice that the point light is pretty weak, but we can actually control light settings in the light properties. So if you remember, some properties appear here if we select an object. If I deselect the light, for example, and I select the cube, you can see the light properties just disappeared. But if I select my point light again, you can see the light properties appear. So now I'm going to click on the object data properties for the light, which is this lamp icon. And I'm going to go inside the settings. Now, we don't have a lot of settings, so it's pretty easy to understand those settings. Now, I'm using Blender 4.5, but if you're using older versions, you might not see temperature, and you also might not see, for example, the exposure. But don't worry about that. Most of the settings are going to remain the same. So we mainly need to adjust the color and the power of the light. Now, the way we can do it inside the Blender 4.5 is like this. First, we can adjust the temperature, and I'm going to explain the temperature in a bit. But in order to demonstrate what temperature does, I first need to increase the power, because right now it's pretty weak. It only has the power of 10 watts, and lights in Blender are measured by watts. Now, if I click the slider and drag it on the right side, you can see the power increases, and the cube goes like very bright. Now, if I move it across, you can see it creates this flat white lighting, which is not what we want mostly, but I'm just using it to demonstrate what the kind of results we can get. Now I'm going to explain what Kelvin scale does in a second. Now I'm going to move the point light towards the red side so that you can see the effect better. So if I go towards the Kelvin scale and if I move it down, you can see the light basically becomes more yellow. If I move it across, you can see it becomes yellow on all different colors, right? But if I take this and drag this up instead of down, I'm going to get more blue lighting. So the higher I get on the Kelvin scale, the bluer the light gets pretty much. I can also create a simple cube without any settings, any materials, right? And now you can see the lighting is more blue, right? The higher I go, the bluer it gets. And then it goes like if I go all the way up, it's going to go white. Now if I go down, look how yellow it becomes, right? So in order to demonstrate this better, I'm going to use this website. This is a very good website. I'm going to provide this in the description of this lecture. And if I scroll up, you can see this Kelvin temperature, right? The lower the temperature, the yellower it gets. The higher the temperature, the whiter or the bluer it gets, pretty much. If you want to create warm scenes, we add the orange light. If you want to create cold, lonely, dark scenes, you add the blue light, basically. If you want to create something misty or melancholical, abstract, you might want to add the blue light. But if you want to create something fuzzy, warm, dreamy, glowy, then you want to add the orange light. Now, if I scroll down, we can see the different temperatures and different use cases. Now, if you look at the scale and you have a scene with a candle, for example, you can see that candle has 1800 Kelvin scale. So let's say this point light, I'm going to go back to Blender, and let's say I want this point light to be right inside of the candle. So if I create a candle, I'm going to place this point light right inside of it. And now I'm going to go to the Kelvin scale and type something like 1800, because I know that 1800 is a very good color for candles. So that's a very good guide to use with different lights in Blender. It not only works with point light, but with other lights as well. Now, I'm going to go ahead and show you other settings as well. So first I showed you the temperature, which you can scroll down or scroll up, and it's going to change the color. You can also change the power, and you can also change the tint. Now, if you want to go realistic, I don't recommend to mess around with the tint too much, but I'm going to show you what this does. Tint basically changes the color. It's like adding a gel in front of the light. They add gels in front of the light to change the appearance. For example, to make it appear more bluish, orangey, reddish, whatever. But most of the time, you want to keep it simple. You don't want to change it, but feel free to experiment it. Now I'm going to show you this. If I click this and turn this to something like green, you can see the light becomes green, becomes blue, orange, purple, whatever. So it's pretty self-explanatory, but I usually leave this by default. And if you want to leave this by default, for example, you messed something up, you left it on red, and you want to turn this to exactly white. First of all, there are two ways of doing it, right? First is by going here and then turning down saturation and turning down hue entirely. And this is going to consider it into the white color. But if I, for example, go here, hover over it and click on the backspace button, it's going to set it back to default. It works pretty much the same for all properties. And if I hover over it as well, if I hover over the temperature, it's going to go back to default. I'm going to click on backspace, and then it went to default 6500 Kelvin. We also have the exposure, and exposure basically turns it either dark or bright. I usually leave this by default. I also leave the tint by default. Now, if I turn this down, as you can see, the light goes dark. If I turn this up, the light goes very, very bright. But I usually like to leave this on default, so I don't mess around with this too much. If I scroll down, I also have a radius. Now, by default, point light has a small radius, and it's very, very strong. But if I increase the radius, it's going to become more soft. So as you can see, the lighting here, if I move this between the two cubes, like this, the lighting is very, very sharp. It's flat. It's very, very sharp. But if I take the radius and scroll up, first of all, watch what's going to happen here. If I scroll up, you can see we get this radius, which is expanding, but also the light becomes a lot softer. And that's something you might want to use in some cases. If you want to add soft lighting on character spaces or any other type of situation, we can increase this. So you can mess around with this, mess around with power, and just achieve the result you want pretty much. So now we got a light which is a lot softer and not as sharp as we had before.